Support for this program is provided by the men and women of the Louisiana Forestry Association. Through sustainable forestry, LFA members promote the health and productivity of Louisiana's forests for generations to come. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Good evening, and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Craig Freeman. My co-host, Beth Courtney, is on vacation. What if the state had a shot at more than $300 million in federal stimulus money to use for educational reform? Should Louisiana pursue it? Despite Governor Jindal's refusal to take unemployment stimulus funds last year, the governor has signed on to the state's application for a share of the $4 billion Race to the Top federal grant. But more than half of the state's school districts did not. Why isn't everyone on board the state's pursuit of federal education reform funding? And if Louisiana does win the Race to the Top dollars, what will that mean for students and teachers? Let's take a look at Louisiana's educational race to reform.
The competition is on, and Louisiana is among 40 states and the District of Columbia in the race for a federal grant that could bring the state as much as $300 million for education reform in grades K through 12. It's called the Race to the Top, or R2T grant, and totals $4.3 billion. It's part of the much larger federal stimulus package slated for education. Louisiana submitted its application on January 19th. Linda Johnson is a member of BESE, the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. She voted in favor of the state competing for the grant.
In our application, we have agreed to, number one, support pay for performance for teachers. Number two, support, if need be, turning around schools by either closing them or allowing them to become charters.
But BESE member Chaz Romer voted against pursuing the federal dollars.
Instead of finding areas where we're wasting money and taking that money and putting it to good use, instead we're just adding more money on top. And I don't think we can survive that any longer. So my basic problem with Race to the Top was we should be doing this already without going to spend more taxpayer dollars.
Well, one of the things that I've learned since I've been on the board since 1999, 2 terms longer than Mr. Roma, is that it does take a considerable amount of money to educate a poor child, and a child, especially a child who comes from a family of poor people who are uneducated.
School districts that wanted to be part of the grant were asked to sign an agreement with the state in order to be included in the application. It was strictly voluntary, and out of Louisiana's 70 school districts, only 28 opted to participate, along with 56 independent charter schools. The participating districts represent more than half of the state's at-risk students who come from families with low incomes. Andy Kopplin, a senior advisor for Teach for America, is a big supporter of the Race to the Top. The organization is active in many of the districts included in the grant.
First of all, it's an enormous infusion of money to help the state of Louisiana advance education, but probably more importantly is the federal priorities and the state's application in response embrace a significant number of important reforms.
The overall goal of the grant is to close achievement gaps and help more kids enter college. Some of the specifics include implementing internationally benchmarked standards and tying assessments to them, turning around low-performing schools, attracting and retaining good teachers by linking their pay, promotion, and retention to student performance. Among the arguments by opponents is that the grant will create unfunded mandates, meaning school districts will have to sustain the new initiatives after the federal dollars expire.
I too worry, are we going to end up with a new bureaucracy, new overhead, new rules, new regulations that in 3 years we can't pay for?
Wayne Savoy is the superintendent of Calcasieu Parish. His district chose not to participate in the R2T grant. For one thing, Savoy says tying teacher pay to classroom performance could unfairly penalize teachers for failing students.
And our teachers are doing the best job they can, and the goal of a teacher is to take the child from where he is when they get him and get him ready for the next grade if possible, okay? But if you have a child that's 2 grade levels behind and that teacher raises him a grade level and a half, is that teacher a poor teacher? No, not at all.
BESE member Linda Johnson says the link between student and teacher performance has always been important.
In my opinion, and I know that is a critical issue with a lot of people, but we've always looked at the performance of students and we can trace that performance back to the teachers. So it's not, in my opinion, it's not something totally new.
Superintendent Savoy says Calcasieu is already making many of the reform changes outlined in the race to the top.
We have credit recovery, graduation coaches, we have extended day, we have academic profiles of our children. We're using research-based strategies. We have an academy. We'll be offering 32 career options. So a lot of this was done by the individuals here in Calcasieu that were looking for better ways to help our children.
The Wall Street Journal recently noted that 2 factors could hurt Louisiana's chances: Governor Jindal's support for school vouchers, which the White House opposes, and the request that school districts and teachers' unions agree to the application. Despite the heavy competition, Louisiana has been identified as a strong contender due to reforms already underway, including the legislature's decision to lift the cap on the number of charter schools allowed in Louisiana, a wise move according to Kopplin.
Secretary Duncan and President Obama have made lifting those kind of barriers to the creation of additional charter schools a big part of their race to the top evaluation. And so Louisiana's legislature did that in response. And again, New Orleans right now is the only city in the country where more than 50% of the public school students are educated in public charter schools.
Superintendent Savoy feels that strengthening public schools should be the focus rather than creating more charter schools.
I have children that are going to MIT, Baylor, SMU, LSU, Ivy League schools that come from this parish, from public schools that has a free and reduced population of 58%. So the public schools are doing a great job, not only in Southwest Louisiana, but in other parts of the state.
Whether or not Louisiana wins the grant money, Kopplin says the educational reform momentum has already begun.
These are things that Louisiana is doing anyway, and we're going to keep doing them anyway. But if we can be recognized and rewarded with increased funding, we can do them faster. And those are good reasons to embrace it.
Well, joining me to explore what parts of Race to the Top they embrace and reject are our audience members. They include Baton Rouge area residents who were randomly recruited and surveyed for us by LSU's Public Policy Research Lab. We also have a member of the Legislative Youth Advisory Council from Ascension Parish. Of those who responded to our pre-show survey question regarding party affiliation, 46% identify themselves as Democrat, 26% as Republican, and 17% as independent or other. When asked whether or not teacher quality is a problem for Louisiana public schools, 58% of respondents think that it is. 35% do not. When asked about the race to the top requirement that teacher pay be based on student achievement rather than seniority, a total of 75% of respondents strongly support or somewhat support this approach. A total of 21% strongly oppose or somewhat oppose this reform. Charter schools that are encouraged in the race to the top application are considered to be better than public schools in overall quality by 42% of respondents. 28% rate them about the same, and 4% place charter school quality as worse than other public schools. A total of 60% of those responding are very or somewhat concerned about the Race to the Top grant diminishing the amount of control a local community has over its school district. A total of 40% are not at all or not very concerned. Despite these reservations, 75% of those responding would advise their school districts to participate in the Race to the Top program. Only 7% would recommend not participating. So let's start there. What do you know about the Race to the Top grant? Do you support it? And if not, what are your concerns? Is this a good program for us to be a part of? Julie?
I personally think that it is, and that we need to raise the bar in Louisiana. I feel that our children are no less more intelligent. Some of them do come from lower socioeconomic status, but I have a person that I admire greatly. His name was Ben Carson. He was the physician. He grew up in a very, very poor, he was a single parent home, and the key to his education and his success was reading. His mother did not know how to read, but her two boys did not realize that. She required that they made a school book report each week, and Ben grew up realizing that there's a whole new world out there that perhaps his mother couldn't furnish for him, but with the school education system, he was able to realize his dream of graduating first of his class in high school, and went on and had a full scholarship to Yale, and he became the first pediatric neurosurgeon to successfully separate Siamese twins.
So, but even with Dr. Carson, it sounds like his parents were doing this. Is there something that the schools can do to make our students better? Susan, you look concerned.
Well, I feel that parents are certainly our school's allies, or they should be included, and they should be, that they can be our allies. However, we do have a great number of parents who cannot read or cannot, do not have the skills to help their children, especially when they reach the upper grades, even like fourth, fifth grade, they can, that's where they lack. But I feel that, the parents that I've worked with, all of them have a strong desire for their children to learn. They want them to, but it just comes to a point where they don't have the background or enough education to actively help them.
Okay. Is this program going to help us? Will the $314 million help our state move a little forward?
I certainly hope it will, but I think we just have to do anything that's available to do what we can to improve the school system. And I think maybe some of the reason that some of the parishes did not want it is that school boards, and we saw this in an election recently, they don't want to give up any control of their schools to anyone else. And I would be curious just how much involvement the federal government will have in it, and I think maybe that's one thing that is slowing down some of these school systems that didn't want to be in it.
Sally, you're nodding your head. You a little concerned about the federal government's involvement?
I do. I do agree with what Miss Lady is saying. Yeah.
Why? Is there what's wrong with the federal government getting involved? Well, Shauna, you also were nodding your head.
Yes, it's more of if the federal gets involved, they may take more control of what's going on without actually being here to see what's going on. They may decide to take control on what they see and not actually what they're experiencing.
But what if they do a hands-off? What if they give the money without any sort of direction or lines of communication or support team? Because I've read that there was a question about if the lines of communication, if they're open between local and then the federal. I mean, if they're not the local's not getting support from the federal to accomplish what they need. I mean, I read that they're kind of iffy. If I wouldn't get the support to accomplish what they want me to accomplish, they need that. They need it to get going.
So we need some regulation, or we want a little less?
No, they need a support team.
Okay.
Because I was reading, I believe, from one of the boards of education that was a concern.
Okay. Is that a concern for any of you? Are you, Nanette, you're worried about how much support we get?
Well, look at history. Every reform package that has ever come down the line for anything they want to reform, the federal government either is all in there mucking it up or all out saying, it's not my fault. They need to have teamwork, they need to get back to basics, and they need to quit complicating it to the point that it doesn't work.
What complicates it? What are we doing wrong now that we think that the grant may be able to help with? Chad?
Right off the top of my head, though, okay, we already have a basic structure on how everything's supposed to work. Okay, instead of adding a board over a board, we need to simplify what we already have. First off, I mean, when I first moved here, the big thing was we're going to allow the gambling votes in, and all this money is going to go into our public education. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they're both bored in school. They enjoy school, but they're bored. Okay, they can do so much more. And, you know, granted, schools aren't babysitters for our children. We have to educate them. We have to teach them how to behave in society and everything else. But there's no reason for a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, young, pretty girls, to be bored with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Well, now, part of that concern is that there's at least some of the survey respondents said we're concerned about teacher quality. Is that a concern that we have, and do we think that the grant is going to be able to help with that in some way? Jesse?
I don't think so. I think that teacher quality is at an acceptable level in Louisiana. I am concerned about having the federal government come in and tell us to do the things that some of the school districts are already doing. Obviously, 42 out of 70 think they're on the right track. These are the things that they should be doing anyhow, and to have the federal government come in and lay down ground rules for us to follow, I don't think we ought to be doing that. I think that's our responsibility. We need to step to the bar. I am concerned about the flow of money, because once we get addicted to the federal money, it's going to be hard to shut it off.
And that's, I guess, another one of the concerns is that we're not sure how long this lasts. And so if we get an infusion of money and then it's gone in a year or 2 or 3, Miosha, is that going to, will this money now help, or would you rather not have it at all?
Well, I'm kind of undecisive about it. We talked about it actually earlier. We talked about how long are you going to give us to do whatever it is that you want us to do. And we talked about earlier how we said, well, maybe there won't be any stipulations. Yeah, right. There will be some stipulations. And as an educator, I don't think that there's anything wrong with teacher quality overall. Another problem that I'm concerned with is the teacher pay. Are you going to rate both my students A and B, saying that they both have to be at, say, basic or 75% or on level, and I get one 3 years behind and I boost them up 2 years in 1 year, and I don't get anything because they're still 1 year behind, as opposed to my other student that's basic, that stays at a basic, that didn't grow any? You're telling me that the teacher that stayed at a basic with the student that was at a basic when they came, and the teacher that did 2 years in one, that just doesn't sound right.
Okay, and so we've got to figure out at least how we're gonna be able to evaluate these teachers.
Exactly. Will it be at a baseline, or will it be so tracking that you are going to look at the growth and not just the baseline, because they keep telling us to differentiate instruction.
Well, there's also, I think, a recent concern about kind of teaching to the test, that all we do is teach for one test and then another test and then another test. Caitlin, is that what, should we continue to evaluate teachers based on student performance on one test, or is there another way to help students learn?
I think that is a problem in today's educational system. We get so caught up in the standards for LEAP and GEE that we kind of lose sight of students' futures beyond, I guess, elementary and secondary education, because students have to also be competitive nationally if they want to do anything with scholarships or colleges if they hope to go out of state or anything. So I think that definitely does impact our students and their futures.
Is there anything that we can do if we want to make sure that our students learn? Is there anything that we can do besides teaching to a test to give teachers more if they're doing better, and evaluate teachers in a different way if they're not improving? Is there any way we can solve this problem?
Put the schools back locally.
More local
schools.
Control.
But now
what if the parents can't, and the children, they can't get to the school after school, hours to get the help if it's across town, and then it's hard for students to relate when they're being bused across town and sitting next to someone else who has a totally different lifestyle. Then they can't relate. And then, the school needs to be their second home. They need to be very comfortable. The parents need to be involved. The kids need to love going there every day. And now kids, it's not a neighborhood school. They can't just walk to school. They're being bused and everything else.
So we've got to bring our schools back into our community. We've got to make them our schools.
Yeah, back in neighborhood schools.
Okay, LaShawn, you look like you agree?
Yeah, it's for now, if a child is going to school and they're being bused, they may have to take a transfer bus, which means they have to wake up an hour or so earlier and be on the bus to get to a school. They may not get home till 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. If they had a school in that area, then they would get home faster. Their parents may be able to go up to the school and talk to the teachers or the principal about that. But if you have a student that they have to wait for, they're going to wait till 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. By the time that child get home, the teachers and principals are gone from the school. So,
no, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like all the solutions that you guys have talked about today are solutions that don't require any federal money.
That's probably true.
So, do we need the federal money at all?
You know, recently in the news, we're spending twice as much money, but our average scores are not improving.
We're hitting a plateau. We're not
progressing. We're spending more money, but no results.
You just can't keep pouring money into something and thinking money is going to solve every problem the schools have.
But this money is going to go to someone. It's going to go to a state.
And
so
we might as well.
Does it mean not ours?
So this is our money that they're giving back to us.
Why don't
But it's going to go to another state if not ours.
To everybody equally and say, do the best you can.
Okay. You think that would be a better solution? Some of you guys are a little more nervous about that, Chad.
I think Louisiana would benefit greatly by adding the trimester school system, year. You go to school for 3 months, you have a month off instead of a 3-month delinquency jamboree. Your ACT scores go up, your SAT scores go up, juvenile delinquency goes down, and dropout goes down, everything goes down. The West Coast embraced it a long time ago, and I just think Louisiana would greatly benefit from it personally.
So we need some kind of small tweaks instead of some federal money. Well, maybe, but we've actually got some experts who are going to be able to help us figure out more about the race to the top and educational reform in Louisiana. So when we return, we'll be joined by a panel of experts to further discuss Louisiana's educational race to reform. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. We're discussing Louisiana's educational race to reform. Joining us now is our panel of experts. Walter Lee is the longest-serving member of the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, or BESE. Mr. Lee is also superintendent of schools in DeSoto Parish and previously served as superintendent in Caddo Parish. Mr. Lee was one of the majority of BESE members who voted to endorse the state's Race to the Top proposal. Joyce Haynes has served as the president of the Louisiana Association of Educators for 3 years. The Louisiana Association of Educators, or LAE, is the largest educational association in the state of Louisiana. LAE did not endorse the state's participation in the Race to the Top due to concerns about the teacher performance pay requirements. Andy Kopplin currently serves as senior advisor to the CEO for Teach for America. Teach for America's mission is to eliminate educational inequities by enlisting high-quality educators. The national organization has more teachers in Louisiana per capita than in any other state in the country. Mr. Kopplin is a supporter of the state's Race to the Top application. Nolton Senegal Sr. serves as executive director of the Louisiana School Boards Association, a position he has held since 2007. The Louisiana School Boards Association is a nonprofit service organization representing school board members in 69 local systems. The association feels that the federal Race to the Top program is not in the best long-term interest of public education. Let's go to our participants for their questions, and I think, Nanette, you had our first question.
Yeah, I would like to know what is so special about this particular reform package that, what are the facts that gives you any idea that this is going to work any better than any of the prior reform packages that didn't work?
Our board member, you want to start us off?
I think that's a good question, and I think you've already had some excellent discussion about education, and I'm just pleased that education is on the mind of people in the state of Louisiana. But to specifically answer your question, we've worked hard I think people are serious about education, but we have not made the progress that we need to make if Louisiana is going to gain in relation to other states, and we just must. This program, for the first time, will permit us as a state to move in the same direction at the same time with one program that will be developed for all of the children, first for those that are directly participating, but then secondly for all the rest of the kids in the state. And I think we're going to see improvement. It's directed toward ensuring that we have a quality teacher teaching every child in the state, supported by a quality school principal. So I think we're going to see the emphasis on teachers and principals, teachers and leadership.
Our other panel members?
And I would disagree with the idea. I believe that the race to the top itself, money is good, but how you use money can be wrong. And when you start to talk about judging our teachers on test scores, that is wrong. Standardized tests have been used to say that we're failing, but no one talks about the great things that we are doing in our public schools. I myself, I'm a product of the public schools, and some of you may be as well. And public schools did great by many folks. I would beg to differ that if you start to look at pay per performance, it will cause low morale. It would cause our teachers to teach toward tests in order to survive and thrive in our classrooms. It is the wrong idea. That money could have been used for the resources necessary, the professional development in subjects. It could have been used for many things to make a difference in our classrooms, other than being punitive toward our teachers, who are 83% qualified. We are knocking at doors and doing great things here in Louisiana, and I believe that we can compete. There are many things that are good, and we should try to promote that. So stop and think about it. Think about how you could use that money, other than being punitive for the folks who are in the trenches working with our children every day, doing and meeting the needs of our children, being creative. That would be stifled if they just end up teaching to tests, because that is the only way they're going to get a raise. Stop and think about it.
Any more thoughts or stops?
We've got lots of thoughts.
You
know, and I think the challenge is to look closely at how Louisiana's performing. And recent studies have shown, and this is true in Louisiana across the country, but kids growing up in high poverty situations, often by the time they're in 4th grade, are already 3 grade levels behind. By the time low-income kids get to high school age, half of them don't graduate, and those who do are often performing at the level of 8th graders in more affluent communities. In Louisiana, we've got significant achievement gaps based on income and ethnicity that we need to overcome. And one of the fundamentals, as Mr. Lee pointed out, is the focus on great quality teachers and great school leaders at the heart of this application. And at Teach for America, what we challenge our teachers to do is to set big goals, invest the kids and their parents in those goals, to work relentlessly, to execute effectively, to monitor progress. And part of the way that we manage our teachers to do that is by actually looking at assessments, benchmark assessments periodically throughout the school year to see if what they're trying to teach the kids is being demonstrated on the test. We teach not to the test, but we teach to the standards, because that's what folks have to learn. And what we found is that that kind of approach can help kids, even in low-income, high-poverty schools, achieve extraordinary levels of success. At one school, for example, led by a Teach for America alum, Jackson Middle School, they've just grown from a 60 to almost an 80 on their school performance score. Every teacher in the building helped his or her children achieve over a year's worth of gains, and almost all of them, in fact, achieved more than a year and a half worth of gains. And this is a school that is by and large filled with kids from low-income families. And so we think a relentless focus on doing what it takes to help our kids achieve at great levels is what is demonstrated in this Race to the Top application, and that's why we support it.
You know, our concern from the Louisiana School Boards Association is that the funds will come into the state of Louisiana, and 4 years down the road, those funds will be gone. So what do we have to do as school board members in the local districts? We will have to approach the citizens and ask them to increase their taxes to support public schools. And that is an unfair financial burden to place on school districts. And so that's why we said that the money coming from the federal government should not be given to the state, and then there's no money in 4 years for us to have to look at. You'll have programs that they will implement and put in place, and those programs will have to continue, but we will not have any funds. Additionally, when we talked to the superintendent, Paul Patrick, and asked about the participating agreement, there was some recourse language in that participating agreement that said that if the school districts were not able to continue these programs, that they will come back on the school districts, ask them for some of that minimum foundation program money. There were a number of recourses that they could take. And we asked him to work with us, and he would not work with us. So, they rushed through this particular process. I was in a meeting in Washington, D.C. on February the 2nd through the 6th. Ernie Duncan addressed the group. 49 other states was in the room when we were there. And all of those states were concerned about why they had to rush through this process in terms of these funds. Why couldn't they have sat with all of the stakeholders, listen to what each stakeholder had to say about this particular process, have them involved in the process, and try to come up with a good product? That did not happen. They rushed through this process, and all of the states are saying the very same thing. What's the rush? Why do you have to rush to get this particular grant into Washington, D.C. to get those funds back? And so, you have to be very, very careful. And 42 of the school districts said no. Too many strings attached. We're not going to burden the local districts with getting funds into the state, and then those funds dry up, and then we will have to go to the citizens and ask them to increase their taxes to support public education.
Okay, I thought you had
a question. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, is it?
Yes.
Did I understand you to say the parishes that do not apply for it, will they, even though they didn't apply for it, will they receive the money also? Will it be state trickle down, or does it go to each parish?
With this application, if the state is awarded funding, 50% of the money will be distributed to the parishes that signed up to participate. The other 50% will stay at the state level, and that money will be used to assist the other parishes that did not directly sign up. Now, they will receive benefit, it just won't be as much as the direct benefit. Also, this program will be designed to ensure that every teacher gets good in-service experiences and gets professional development help. It's not punitive. I don't think any teacher is going to lose. The value added part, the teacher pay part, we already have a model in this state that's working very well. It's called the Teacher Application Program, or Teacher Advancement Program, TAP. That's in more than 40 schools. Teachers are rewarded, and that's what we expect with this program. They'll receive extra compensation, and part of that evaluation will be based on student progress, 50%, but the other 50% will be based on evaluation by their peers, and that's the best evaluation you can have, along with the principal's evaluation. So it's a comprehensive program. It's designed to assist teachers and principals, but it will be very organized, structured, and most of all, we're going to see improvement with student learning, and that's what we want.
I beg to differ on a couple of the issues here. One of the things that is not truly research-based is the TAP program. It's been used in a way that the entire school is now benefiting, not used in the way Race to the Top is suggesting with pay for performance. Another thing that's happening here is that if a parish did not apply, and in this the opportunity for them to get money, they will have to give up something. They will have to make some promises. There will be strings attached. if you're going to get some of that money, strings are going to be attached. And one of the first things that have been said by our superintendent is that you must do pay for performance in order to even get any of this money, which is going to be a problem. And then one of the other issues that comes to mind is Teach for America itself. If you truly believe that our teachers who have spent 4 years getting their college education and that are working that hard need to be replaced by folks who will come in for 2 years and then are gone, it's an admirable program. I give them that. But it is a money-making situation with Teach for America, and some of them are very good. I really rally around the fact that they come in for 2 years and give their time to our children here in Louisiana. But for our folks who have given up 4 years of their lives, who are working hard in our classrooms and are doing and jumping through hoops on a daily basis for our children, should not be removed because of a test score. And so I beg to differ with Teach for America and the whole idea. It's a money-making thing. Somebody's making money bringing them here. School boards have to put out certain amount of monies to even get them. It's a 2-year hitch for most of them. They're gone after 2 years. And there is no research that say that they come up with better test scores than what we already have in our public schools. Someone needs to really look at how great our public schools are. Sure, we want to change the gaps that exist, but everyone is working to change those gaps, not just Teach for America.
It's the last point that you made that I completely agree with, which is we are not the only ones fighting to educate Louisiana's kids, and in fact our nation's kids. We're not the only ones fighting to close the achievement gap. But in fact, there's a lot of evidence, including Louisiana's nationally regarded value-added study that the Board of Regents conducts on the effectiveness of our teachers in raising student achievement. In fact, they compare the effectiveness of those teachers, those new Teach for America teachers, initially as effective as veteran teachers, and over the first 2 years that they're teaching, they outperform veteran teachers. That's actually an independent, rigorous study that the state of Louisiana has been commended for both by President Obama and by Secretary Arne Duncan about our performance. And that's why, the reason we're able to succeed in that way is this year we have over 50,000 of our country's future leaders competing to teach in 4,100 slots in our most challenging school districts. We had a quarter of the seniors at Spelman College in Atlanta, historically black college in Atlanta last year, apply for Teach for America. About 15% of the Ivy League seniors applied. And they're competing to come, 700 of them next year, to teach right here in Louisiana. And their results are incredible. And if I could make one point about Ms. Gibson's comment earlier, which is, as a teacher, we would be very concerned with the same issues you were, which is the evaluation going to be based on where kids end up or the growth that they achieve? And the important thing about the study I just referenced and my understanding of the state's policy is that they're going to look at the growth in that year that each student achieves. So if they all start at different places, it's not where they end up, it's how much that student gained during that year, which I think is a much fairer way to approach whether or not there are gains in the classroom.
One of the major concerns we have from the school district's point of view is the sustainability. We can't get the teachers to stay beyond the 2-year period. So they come, Teach for America. They come, they stay for 2 years, and then they're gone. So they have a resume. They put on that resume.
You didn't have a teacher, great teacher.
But the resume. Well, why not stay in the state of Louisiana? In addition to that, the teachers will go to the recovery school district in the Orleans area, but they will not go to the northern part of the state. Madison Parish is hurting for teachers, and they have asked the teachers to go into that area. They have refused to go. Paul Patrick, in a sense, we were told, we're almost forcing the teachers to go to the northern part. They don't want to go to the northern part because of the rural parish. They want to stay in the urban areas or the urban settings so they can be in the city of Baton Rouge or in the city of New Orleans. If we can get those folks to move to the rural areas, then maybe we.
The Teach for America folks?
Yeah, the teachers that are coming in.
Why don't people live there already that can teach?
We have
because now you're saying, why don't they want to move there, but why isn't somebody already living there that
can
teach?
Why want those teachers if they're so dedicated to teaching students? And that's where we have to always remember. The emphasis is on the children. you know, the children that we serve and the children that the same thing goes through with the funds that they get.
Not hearing a lot about the kids. I'm hearing a lot about bashing Teach for America, how this program won't work because of I don't see a lot of information. I'm hearing from Ms. Haynes how, you know, these teachers are going to get slapped on the wrist and I mean, is this program really a fail or pass, or is it for any?
The jury's out.
Okay, can I finish? Yet. Can I finish? I'm not finished. Is the program Is the program a fail or a pass,
no
or
research.
Are we looking at increments of improvement? Is any improvement? Is it worth it? I mean, someone's going to get the money. If it's not Louisiana, who's going to get it?
Okay, it would really depend on your question. If you're talking about the money, we don't know yet who's going to get it.
Well, I know that's what I'm saying.
But if you're talking about our students and what needs to happen if we had that kind of money, we need to talk about professional development in those subjects where those teachers may need that. We already have 83% of teachers qualified, veteran teachers who are doing a great job, and we're being told that if you don't bring these test scores up, in what way we don't know yet, the growth that needs to happen, how much, someone already talked about, what difference are we going to make here when it comes to our tests. None of that is known yet. But what is known is the morale will be low if that is the route we're going to go. What is known is we're going to have to teach two tests.
You're saying something
well, then at the same time, this time you need to let me finish. What I look at is if we're going to teach our children and be creative enough to have our children move to be able to do the things that they need to do to apply themselves, it is not that we need to allow our teachers to teach for tests. That's what you're going to cause with the idea of paper performance. If you're not going to cause that, if you use the money in another way, use the money for the resources, use the money for the professional development in the subjects, use them, because all of the children, you've got core subjects being tested right now. Concentrate on reading and math. Other teachers right now, you're not testing some of the subjects right now. You're not testing the French, the Spanish, the music, and so forth. None of PE. You're not testing any of that. So they're talking about making tests as we go. They're also talking about common standards around the country. You must admit that Louisiana is diverse and totally different. So we're talking about common standards that we have to build. We haven't seen those yet either.
In the synopsis for this program, it mentioned teacher advancement projects or
teacher
program. I had a question about that because I have a daughter at LSU, and she's very, very smart. She could have been anything. She wanted to be a teacher. But she told me from the get-go, I cannot work in Louisiana because I'm not going to get paid very well. And every person she meets, when she tells them I'm going to be a teacher, they say, oh my gosh, why do you want to do that? And that's a shame.
It is.
That's a real shame. I think our educators are our future. Whether they're Teach America or they got educated at LSU, Spelman, wherever. I think you need to be proud of where you go to school. I was educated in Tennessee. I'm very proud of my education. I was very ready to go to college. I never went to a private school. I went to public schools, and my teachers were fabulous from the kindergartner. As a kindergartner, I learned, and each year built on that. And
our past governor was a former educator, Kathleen Banco. She brought the state of Louisiana to the southern regional average, the SREB average. She saw what putting money into education could do, and so she wanted to encourage teachers to stay in the profession. Those are the kind of leaders that the state of Louisiana need, and we urge and want to have to stay into the state of Louisiana. We had that education governor, and she was very, very strong, and she did a magnificent job. It was just unfortunate that Katrina happened on her watch, and then a lot of people looked at that and felt like she wasn't doing a good job.
What I think we have to keep in mind is teachers are working hard. Teachers are dedicated. There's not a question or concern about teachers today. What we need to concentrate on is improvement for children. And that's what this program will assist with. Now, it will hold everybody accountable, but that's just a part of life. And I don't see it being punitive in any way. I am a school superintendent in northwest Louisiana in a rural area.
And aren't you doing well?
We're doing well, but not well enough in this state. One out of 3 students are below grade level. Now, folks, is that acceptable? It's not acceptable to any of us. Only about 3/4 or less of the students are graduating from high school on time. Now, there are questions, there are concerns. This is not going to be perfect, but we need to improve, and this program will help us move in that direction. We also, in my school system, we have the TAP model, and I assure you the teachers like it. And we're seeing good results, and those teachers are going to be rewarded extra because their students are going to achieve well.
Gay has a question for you, Ms.
I
Haynes.
really do.
Yes, please.
I get the feeling, and I hope I'm wrong, that the teachers are the powers that be against it. And it sounds like the teachers are more concerned about their job than teaching the children. At least that's how it's coming across to me. And I hope I'm wrong.
Yes, ma'am.
But I really get that feeling that the teachers are y'all are against it because you don't want any teacher to lose a job. And I think we do need to weed out some of these teachers.
I have no problem with the teachers incompetent. There are things in place for that already. But, you know, there are powers that be much more than the teachers union, trust me. They are talking about changing the teacher salary, cutting it from where it is, and then the only way you're going to get more money would be pay per performance by the test score. So that is a problem.
I've not heard that.
Well, the jury's still out, so you're going to see through legislation what's going to happen. But you are right. What the teachers do know is that money could be used for all the things that they need in those classrooms so that they don't have to spend their own money to buy those things. All those creative experiments and the things that they do and have to buy that stuff in order for that to happen. For every extra pencil and paper and the things that they have to do for the children, that could be stopped if we put the money where it's needed for the materials and the resources that are needed. And so we see all the other things that they want to look at and do with that money and make decisions about folks, which is just going the wrong way. So that's the part I need for you to see, and I'm hoping that you'll see that the idea of how you use the money is what's important.
The National School Boards Association, in conjunction with the National Teachers Association, the National Superintendents and Administrators, came together and looked at the issue of pay for performance. Those are the kinds of things that we were asking here in the state of Louisiana. Bring all of the stakeholders together and let the stakeholders meet so they can decide what they can live with. We approached the superintendent, asked him to do that, and we were told that he would invite us into the process, but that didn't happen. He came to our office, to the Louisiana School Boards Association. We asked a number of questions, and he gave us answers. We even asked about the 50%. Why the State Department have to have 50% of the money when the money is coming in to help the children? Why not take 25% and do something with a data system that you want to use, and take the other 75% and use for the children? It has to be all about the children. That's who we're trying to help in this process. And a lot of times when you get the bureaucrats involved in it, they attach to the 50% and want to maintain or keep that instead of putting it in the classroom where the children will benefit from those funds.
Okay, one quick.
No, you can go.
Okay, real quick. Part of that 50% that remains at the state level will be used to build a communication system, infrastructure system, statewide that will benefit every child. A much improved technology system. We live in a technology day and age. We need more information about students and their progress, and part of this money will be used for that purpose. Part of it will be distributed out to other schools that are not directly participating. So it's not money that's staying at the state. It will be used to benefit children.
And I think that's the issue that was brought up just a few minutes ago. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. And I think part of what the information system does is it allows teachers, students, parents, school principals, and others to look at the data. And that's, again, how we try to manage our teachers at Teach for America, which is set a big goal, 80% mastery of the content standard, and then work backwards if we want to be there in May, where do we have to be in April and March and February and January and check up on how we're doing? And that's what our teachers do, and that's why the results of Louisiana studies and national studies show that Teach for America's teachers are outperforming other more experienced teachers in rigorous studies. We are in rural areas, St. Helena, Point Capee. We are in rural Mississippi, and we'd like to go to rural Louisiana in the Delta as well. And so those are things that we're doing, but we're raising private money to be able to do those things, and that's the only limitation on our expansion.
Chad?
It just seems like you guys are trying to squeeze too much in on, race to the top. It just seems like you guys are trying to squeeze something in for the data thing, and it's like I said before, you guys already have this structure set up for a reason, and it's worked so far, I guess. There's failings, of course, but it just seems like if the money's going to be made available, make it available. Don't sit there and say half of it's going to go somewhere else for something else. It just seems like the same old thing, people putting it in their pockets or into their family's business who's going to be studying the data and everything. Like 52% of our poor students are going to be influenced directly by this race to the top, but only 50% of the money's going to them. That something just doesn't jive right there for me.
Well, we're spending $5 or $6 billion collectively, and so this
$314 million to
right.
Louisiana.
It's a small part.
It is a small,
but it's a signal. I mean, and the school districts that have signed up to participate, nobody forced them to. They did so voluntarily.
That's right.
And they did so because they were in agreement with the thing, and they also wanted to receive the extra resources to invest in their kids.
But what
the
is
42 school districts that did not sign up,
themselves?
though, had major concerns, just like you, sir. They didn't have a lot of unanswered questions. And when it comes time to sitting down and trying to work those questions out, that was not done. That was just a rush through this process. All we asked for, the stakeholders, was that please let us be involved in the process. And that didn't happen. And so that was the concern. Just like you have the serious concerns, and when I was at the meeting that I talked about earlier in February, the other 49 states had the same comment. Why rush through this? Why not the stakeholders sit, work this out, understand what you're going to be doing, and then do your grant application and submit it to the federal government?
In my family alone, I'm one of the few of all my cousins that's not a teacher. Everybody, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, everybody on every part of my family has been in the teaching profession, okay? Public, all of them. It doesn't make sense to me. And this is weird coming from me, even. It's just all these millions of dollars, and we're trying to figure out how to spend it before we figure out where we need to spend it. And we're figuring out whose pockets is going into, or who stops it here and then trickles down to there, before we ever truly understand everything that we need to look at. It's like trying to do an algebra equation and not having all the parts to the puzzle.
You've got to have structure, and you have to have accountability. Well, the structure we have today and the practice we have today is not getting the results that we just all want for our children. This past session of the legislature, a law was passed that said in the year 2014, 80% of the children will graduate from high school on time. Folks, that's never going to happen the way we're going today.
And that's why we need to hurry.
So we must.
We also need to change our high schools. It needs to be relevant.
We all talk about what should happen and what should be done, but it has not happened to this point. This program is not the answer for everything, but it will help us move in the right direction. And if it'll help, why not do it?
Well, we've got to move in a different direction. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And so I really want to thank our panelists for their participation tonight, Mr. Lee, Ms. Haynes, Mr. Kopplin, and Mr. Senegal. When we come back, we'll have a few closing comments. It's estimated that 15 states will share a portion of the $4.3 billion Race to the Top money. The first round of winners will be announced in April and the rest at the end of September. If Louisiana is a finalist, the grant money would come at a critical time. A $247 million mid-year state budget shortfall forced the Department of Education to cut more than $16 million from programs in elementary and secondary schools. That's all the time we have for this edition of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to tell us your thoughts about Louisiana's educational race to reform by commenting on our website, lpb.org/public square. We'd love to hear from you, like we did from viewers of our last month's program on streamlining Louisiana government. Leonard suggests that the state move nonviolent prisoners into high school and colleges, thereby funding education with the money we are spending to warehouse nonviolent offenders. Lynn recommends that the state eliminate many non-essential state workers. And for those displaced employees, Kim suggests that the state use its education department to put them in skills evaluation training through those institutions and help them connect with new opportunities. Remember, you can connect with us online and watch expanded interviews from our backgrounder, take this month's survey, and submit a topic idea for a future show. Don't forget, you can now follow us on Twitter and Facebook. The Louisiana Legislature's opening day is March the 29th. What issues are on the forefront, and how will they help deal with the dwindling state revenues? Join us in March for Legislative Preview 2010. Thanks for watching, and good night.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org. Support for this program is provided by the men and women of the Louisiana Forestry Association. Through sustainable forestry, LFA members promote the health and productivity of Louisiana's forests for generations to come. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.